welcome to Real Live in New York. I'm Megan, your activity guide today. And just a little bit about myself. I am a licensed New York City tour guide and a performer, and I'm so excited to be showing you around New York City today. And it is a gorgeous day outside. We have bright blue skies and just the beginning of spring. So we're gonna get to see some buds in the trees. And today we're going to explore a little bit of Central Park. So it's a perfect place to be at the beginning of spring. So our city walk is going to be exploring part of Central Park. And then our real activity is something so wonderfully New York-y. We are going to hail a taxi cab. So I'm super excited to get started. Now, throughout our time together, there's going to be a series of quizzes. I hope that you will participate in these quizzes. They're going to be polls, so it's a wonderful way of gauging how well you are understanding the material. So please vote every time you see those quizzes come up. And you can also feel free to chat with one another and practice the phrases that we are learning in the chat. So make sure that you utilize that chat feature. That's such a unique part of this program, that you actually get to use the phrases in real time. So we're going to do just a practice quiz real fast to warm up. So I want to know, are you ready for New York? So let me know if you are ready for New York. Now, every time one of these quizzes comes up, I'm going to count down from 3 just to make sure that you have time to answer the polls or the quizzes. So we're gonna start practicing that right now. So we have 3, 2, 1, and let's see how we did. All right, so off we go. It is now time for our city walk. For our city walk today, we are going to explore part of Central Park. So we're going to explore the Great Lawn. We're going to explore a little bit of the Delacorte Theater, and we're going to exit the park and we're going to see a museum, a very famous museum here in New York City, the American Museum of Natural History. Now, something to know about Central Park. Central Park is huge. It is over 800 acres in size. In terms of distance, it runs between 59th Street and it goes all the way up to 110th Street. So it's over 50 blocks long from north to south. And then in terms of going east to west, it runs between 8th Avenue and 5th Avenue. You could literally spend days and days and days here in the park and never get bored and still have so much to see, do, and experience. And that's at any time of the year. So where we are right now, I've entered the park at 81st Street and I'm about in the middle of the park. So I'm really about in the middle of the park, both east to west and north to south. Now I am going to attempt to turn the camera around so that you can get a glorious view of the park. So here we are looking at part of Central Park, and this part of Central Park is known as the Great lawn, the Great Lawn. And you could see it's very, very open. Right now, we don't have a lot of people on the Great Lawn, but as the weather continues to warm up, we're going to see more and more people out here. So we have baseball fields. I'm going to try to point to it. Got a baseball field right there. We have another baseball field off in the distance. We have a couple of baseball leagues here, sort of intramural, not professional baseball teams that will play here. But what the Great Lawn is really known for, it's really known for the wonderful concerts that take place here in the summertime. So these concerts, they are absolutely free. And anybody in New York City, whether you live in New York City or are visiting for the very first time, you are welcome to go to these concerts. Now, historically, these concerts have included things such as concerts by the Metropolitan Opera, the New York Philharmonic, and some much more popular singers such as Elton John, Bon Jovi, and Simon and Garfunkel have performed here. Now, in the chat, feel free to talk with one another about whether or not you've seen any performances of Elton John's or Bon Jovi's, or if you are more of a Metropolitan Opera and New York Philharmonic person. I know that that tends to be what I am, a Metropolitan Opera and New York Philharmonic type of person. Now, in addition to concerts, and you have to imagine, this lawn just full with thousands and thousands of people, and people will come here with a picnic basket and a picnic blanket. They'll lay out here for hours. They will bring sandwiches, cheese, crackers, soda, and they'll sit out here waiting for people to perform. And perform, that is one of our vocabulary words today, perform. So to perform, that's basically to get up on a stage and to sing or to dance or whatever your medium of art is. So again, in the chat, you could always say, I would love to watch Elton John perform here. I would love to watch BTS perform in the Great Lawn. Or you could say, I would not want to see Elton John perform here. But in the chat, practice saying perform, and you can try saying it out loud as well. Try saying it out loud at home. I would love to see Elton John perform here. I would love to see Mariah Carey perform, or I'd love to see Lady Gaga perform here. Now, in addition to the performers, the live performances here, we've also had a lot of movies perform here, or they don't perform, but they get shown here. They make a debut here. So amongst the movies that have performed here or been shown here, has anybody here seen Disney's Pocahontas? If you've seen Disney's Pocahontas, Pocahontas had its debut. The very first time that it was ever shown to a public audience was right here in Central Park. And I think that's so wonderful, because so much of that movie, Pocahontas, is about nature. And we have so much nature here in Central Park. Oh, and I told you that we were going to get some springtime in here. These are our very first buds of the season, and this whole tree is going to blossom, and people travel from all over the world to see Central Park blooming in the springtime. It's coming, my friends. It's coming. We have spring coming. I'm so excited about this. Now, from the Great Lawn, I'm going to try to walk us to a slightly different spot, because there's another cool thing that has to do with a film here. So I'm going to show us a little bit more of the Great Lawn, and then let's see how the sun's doing. And this is also very exciting because the weather's a little bit warmer, we have people out here jogging, we've had some street performers here, we have people walking. They're very cute dogs. And over here we have some people picnicking, which I'm really excited to show you because this is such a New York thing. The weather gets nice, we come out to Central Park, and we have our picnics. Now, off in the distance, I'm going to attempt to point to it, right there, you're going to see a castle. Yes, a castle here in Central Park. This castle is known as Belvedere Castle. Oh, and as the sun comes out, it might get a little bit harder to see Belvedere Castle, but it is still there. It's right there, Belvedere Castle. Has anybody here seen Home Alone 2 Lost in New York? Write in the chat if you've seen Home Alone 2 Lost in New York. In that movie, Belvedere Castle is featured. So it's featured in that movie quite prominently. It's also featured in the movie Elf, in the Christmas movie Elf. So lots of Christmas movies use Belvedere Castle. There's an Elf, it's a very scary scene, at least it's scary to me, where the Central Park police, who don't actually exist, they were made up for that movie. The Central Park police are chasing down Santa Claus, and they end up at Belvedere Castle on their horses, and their horses look very scary as they chase down Santa Claus. So this Belvedere Castle is a little bit of a movie star here in New York City. So again, we have the Great Lawn. So this is where we'll see people later on in the summer. They're going to bring their picnic baskets and get ready to watch performers. And then over on this side, we already have some people picnicking, and we have Belvedere Castle. So lots of cool things in this area of Central Park. So it's now time for a quiz. So if I could have a quiz, please. And for this quiz, I want to know, let's see how well you were listening. I want to know which Disney movie had its debut here on the Great Lawn of Central Park. Which Disney movie had its debut here on the Great Lawn of Central Park? Was it Pocahontas, The Little Mermaid, or The Lion King? Was it Pocahontas, The Little Mermaid, or The Lion King? So I promised you that I would count down from 3. So I'm going to count down from 3. So we have 3, 2, 1. Okay. If you said the answer was Pocahontas, get your victory dances ready. Put those victory dance emojis in the chat and maybe make it like a very naturey victory dance, because we do have spring coming and Pocahontas debuted here in Central Park because there is so much nature here in Central Park. If you said Little Mermaid, that's my favorite. I wish that Little Mermaid made its debut here, but alas, it did not, nor did The Lion King. They both also feature nature, but very different nature, right? I feel like Pocahontas is very like woodland, so you kind of feel the way that you feel when you are here in the middle of Central Park. So great job answering all of the questions. Now we're going to move on to our next topic. So our next topic is the Delacorte Theater. So the Delacorte Theater, oh, cute puppies. I love puppies. So this is a theater. The Delacorte Theater is a theater in the middle of Central Park. Now this is an outdoor theater, and the tickets to go see a show here. Do you want to take a guess in the chat? Just take a guess. How much do you think it would cost to see a show here at the Delacorte Theater? Do you think it would be very expensive? To give you an idea, we get a lot of really famous movie stars. At least they're famous here in the United States. So for example, Al Pacino will come and perform here at the Delacorte Theater. There we have the sign that says Delacorte Theater. So knowing that lots of famous people come here to perform, do you think that it's very expensive to see a show here? So if you said it's not very expensive in the chat, then you are absolutely correct. It is absolutely free to see a show here at the Delacorte Theater. The tickets here are absolutely free. Now they usually perform Shakespeare performances here. Because of that, we have a statue of Romeo and Juliet outside of the Delacorte Theater. And we also have, this is Shakespeare's very last play that he ever wrote, The Tempest. So we have a statue depicting a scene from The Tempest right here. Now the Delacorte Theater, they do a program called Shakespeare in the Park. It happens every summer. They present 2 different Shakespeare plays. And as I mentioned, those tickets are absolutely free. Now, because they're free, how do you get tickets to this? Oh, I have to show you this. So we have a street performer here. Because we're right here by the Shakespeare Delacorte Theater, we have a Shakespearean troubadour. How amazing is that? I love that. So when Shakespeare in the Park is on, this street that I'm walking down right now will be filled with people who are waiting in line to get tickets. So they'll be waiting in line to get tickets, and they'll hang out here for hours. And hang out, this is one of our vocabulary words. They would hang out here for hours waiting to get tickets. People will come as early as 5 a.m. to get tickets, and they'll wait in line. That's the box office there. The line will go all the way down this road, past the rock way off in the distance, and then it'll curve around. And people will hang out here from 5 o'clock in the morning until noon, hoping to get tickets. And those tickets will often sell out. Now, to hang out, that means like you're just kind of, you're waiting. You're waiting. You know you're going to be waiting, so you're kind of calm about it. And sometimes you do fun things. People might bring board games. Again, people might bring picnics. People often wait with their friends. And we have performers like our Shakespearean troubadour who will come and entertain people who are waiting in line for the tickets. Now, at this theater, you have to wait in line to get your tickets. At a theater such as a Broadway theater, you might order your tickets online ahead of time. And if you order your tickets online ahead of time, you might say something like, if you're walking with your friends, you might say something like, hang on, I'm going to go to the box office to pick up our tickets. And if you say, hang on, I'm going to go to the box office to pick up our tickets, you're just telling them to wait just a quick moment. You're not going to be very long. You're just going to dip into the box office and pick up your tickets. But if you're going to Shakespeare at the park, you're going to hang out for a very long time. Now I'm going to attempt to turn the camera around so I can talk directly to you for a minute. Okay, so we talked about the difference between hang out and hang on. They're very, very similar. So it's a very, very subtle difference. Hang out or hang on. So if you are waiting in line for the Delacorte Theater, you're going to be waiting for a very long time. It's going to be several hours. So you would typically be hanging out. You would say, I'm going to hang out by the Delacorte Theater and wait to get tickets for Shakespeare in the Park. But if you're going to see a Broadway show, you'll probably get your tickets online ahead of time, and your tickets will be waiting for you at the box office. And if you're walking with your friends right before you go in the theater, you might say something like, hang on a moment, hang on a minute, or just hang on, I'm going to go pick up the tickets. So hang on, I'm going to go pick up the tickets. And practice that in the chat because they're so similar. It's very easy to get it mixed up. So you would say, if it's just a very short period of time, you might say, hang on, I'm going to get some carrots from the kitchen, or hang on, I have to grab my shoes from my closet. But if it's going to be a long time, you might say, I'm going to go hang out in the park. And that means you're going to be in the park for a long time. Or you might say, I'm going to hang out in the theater district, which basically means, you have time to kill. You're going to be there for a while. You might even get a meal or meet up with friends while you are hanging out. So that's the difference between hanging out and hanging on. And practice that in the chat because it's very, very difficult, and it's great to tell each other where you will be hanging out. And maybe there's a great place in your hometown to hang out. You're like, I like to hang out at the mall. That means I'm going to be at the mall for a very long time. Or hang on, I'm going to run to the bathroom. Or hang on, I'm going to run and pick up some lipstick in that store. And then someone else might say, I'm just going to go hang out at the mall for a long period of time. Okay, so I want to know how well you understood the Delacorte Theater. So I want to know, how can you get tickets to the Delacorte Theater? So how can you get tickets to the Delacorte Theater? Do you get those tickets by waiting in a line and you get there very early? Or do you buy the tickets online? So do you get tickets to the Delacorte Theater? That's the theater in Central Park. Do you get them by waiting in line, or do you buy them online? Waiting in line or buying them online? So I'm going to count down from 3. So we have 3, 2, 1, blast off. Okay, if you said that you get them by waiting in line early, you get to do a victory dance. Woo! So let me see your victory dance emoji, and you can be very dramatic about it since we were buying theater tickets. If you said online, it's very tricky because these words are close, in line and online. But online is how you would buy a ticket to a Broadway show. You would go online and buy them in advance. But there's no buying online for a show at the Delacorte Theater. You have to wait in line and get there early while you hang out in the park. So it's now time for our next stop, which is the American Museum of Natural History. So I'm going to turn the camera around. Here we are crossing the street. So we are exiting Central Park, and we are now crossing what we call Central Park West, because it's on the west side of Central Park. There's the park. We've got some angry cars. And if I turn the camera around, this building in front of us, right there, that is the American Museum of Natural History. I don't know if anybody here has ever seen the movie Night at the Museum. It's a very beloved movie here in the United States. So I don't know if it is as popular in Korea, but like I said, it's so beloved here in the United States. And that movie takes place in the American Museum of Natural History. Well, I love this area of the museum because we're looking into the planetarium. So this is called the Hayden Planetarium. And there is a giant sphere. So I can show you the giant sphere. Giant sphere. That is supposed to be the sun. It is obviously not to scale, but that's supposed to be the sun. And then we have some of the planets surrounding the sun. And you can just make out those planets. I can see them in the screen. So I see Saturn and Jupiter through the window. Now, inside of this museum, there's a lot of other things besides a model of the universe. If you love dinosaurs, this is the place to go. There are so many dinosaur skeletons here. So you can come here and you can basically be face to face with a Tyrannosaurus Rex, or at least the skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. In the chat, feel free to write what your favorite dinosaurs are. And actually, I'm curious because I feel I wouldn't know how to say the name of a dinosaur in another language. So I'm curious if you're familiar with our dinosaur names, but a Tyrannosaurus Rex, that's like the big scary one with the big teeth and the tiny arms that's usually featured in a lot of the movies. So Tyrannosaurus Rexes are here. And also inside of the museum, there is a giant life-sized model of a blue whale. It is huge. Those whales are so big. And this model, the model weighs 21,000 pounds. It's so big. And there's a lot of events that take place underneath the whale. For a while, you could actually get vaccinated under the whale. They were giving out COVID-19 vaccinations under the whale, and you'd get a little sticker that said, I was vaccinated under the whale. They also have fancy like fundraiser parties under the whale. And once a year, they actually have a giant slumber party inside of this museum, and you actually can sleep under the whale. You can spend the night here underneath the whale. So there's lots of different things here that are of intrigue. So we're going to use intrigue as one of our vocabulary words. So that basically means that it's interesting. So if you find dinosaurs of intrigue, that means that you find dinosaurs interesting. You could also say, I find dinosaurs to be intriguing. I find dinosaurs to be intriguing, or I find the planetarium intriguing. You can literally see the birth of the universe in a video here at the planetarium. So you might find that to be intriguing. Or maybe you find ocean life, like the whale, to be intriguing. So I would love to know what you find to be intriguing. So write that in the chat, and it could be anything. You could say, I find cheese to be intriguing, or I find English, like the English language, to be intriguing. I find New York City to be intriguing. Or again, you could also say, I find New York City to be of intrigue. I find plants to be of intrigue. I find submarines to be of intrigue. So practice this in the chat. I want to know what you find to be of intrigue. And as we do that, I'm going to walk a little bit further around the museum. The museum is huge. It was actually founded by the father of one of our former presidents, Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt might be one of my favorite, well, he's definitely one of my favorite US presidents. He might be my favorite. So we're gonna just kind of get an idea of how big this museum is as we walk around it. I also want to see how well you understood what we were talking about with the museum, because we talked about some pretty difficult words, actually. So I want to know if I could have a quiz, please. What are you able to see if you visit this museum? What are you able to see if you visit this museum? And there is actually more than one right answer, so choose two answers if you can. So are you able to see a blue whale, mummies, the Mona Lisa, or dinosaur skeletons? So are you able to find or see a blue whale, mummies, the Mona Lisa, or dinosaur skeletons? So I promised I would count down from 3. So I am going to count down from 3. So we have 3, 2, 1. Time's up. Okay, if you said that you can see a blue whale and or dinosaur skeletons, get that victory dance going. Let me see a dinosaur dance or a whale dance with the emojis, because I think those would be really, really fun. I'm always so impressed with your emoji game. It's so good. And if you said that you could see mummies or the Mona Lisa, alas, is not in New York City. It is in France, unless it's on tour someplace at the moment, but that's at the Louvre in France. And if you said mummies, we do have a museum where you can see lots of mummies. That is the Metropolitan Museum of Art, not the American Museum of Natural History. Along the sides, we actually have these depictions of animals that you would see if you went out to the Midwest here in the United States. We have these rams, and then we have the American buffalo here at our museum. Such a giant animal, our American buffalo. Okay, so great job. It is now time for our real activity. So I'm going to turn the camera around, and then we will talk about our real activity. For our real activity, we're going to be hailing a taxi cab. Now, the most important thing you need to know when you are getting in a taxi cab in New York City is you need to know which intersection you are going to. Now, intersection, this is a great vocabulary word. An intersection is where two streets meet. So I'm going to attempt to turn the camera and myself around. So we are here at an intersection. This intersection is 77th Street and Central Park West. So the intersection of 77th Street and Central Park West. When you get into a cab in New York City, usually the first thing that you say is you say the intersection that you are going to. So this is also good to know before you get in a taxi cab. That's even more useful than an address, is knowing which intersection you're going to. A lot of times if you say like, I'm going to 325 42nd Street, the cab driver won't know where that is. But if you say, I'm going to 42nd Street and 8th Avenue, they will know exactly where that is. So before you get into a cab, you might ask the person that you're meeting or the place that you're going, what is the intersection? What is the intersection that you are at? And if you don't know, when you get into the cab, I bet you if you give an address to the cab driver, they are going to ask you, what is the intersection? So you can practice saying this in the chat as well, because you can always ask a friend, what intersection are we going to? Do you know what intersection we're going to? And try saying the word intersection out loud, because That's hard to say intersection. And you could also say, I'm going to the intersection of 72nd Street and Central Park West. So practice saying that in the chat. Now, when you get into a cab, the first thing that you're going to say is the intersection that you are going to. Now, you could also say please afterwards. I always like to add a little bit of a please because it sounds a little bit nicer. And sometimes there are different routes to get to an intersection, and the cab driver might ask you for the route. And I usually just say the quickest way possible. And if you want to just even skip that step where they're asking for the route, you could give the intersection and then say the quickest way possible, please. So you could get into a cab and say 72nd Street and Broadway, the quickest way possible, please. So feel free to practice saying that in the chat. Now I'm going to turn the camera around because we're going to talk about the next step of hailing a taxi cab. As we look, we can see lots of taxi cabs. In New York City, you know that a taxi cab is a taxi cab because it's bright yellow. Now, if we look, it's a little tricky because the light is really bright. But you'll see there are some numbers on top of the taxi cab right there. Now, if those numbers are lit up, which they are on this taxi cab and this taxi cab, if those numbers are lit up, that means that the taxi cab is available. So that means that you can hail it. And typically the way that you hail a taxi cab is you put your hand out. I'm curious if we see anybody. I'm going to hail a taxi cab for you in a minute. But I'm curious if we see anybody trying to hail a taxi cab. So that one has somebody in it, so that taxi cab's lights are off. So this is what you always have to look for when you are looking for a taxi. You are looking for that bright yellow car in New York City that says that it's a taxi cab, and then you're hoping to find a taxi that's available, and that means that the lights on top of the cab would be on. So this taxi cab right here, the lights on top of this taxi cab are on, so that means that this taxi cab would be available for us to hail. Now, before we get in the taxi, I want to see if you got the idea of how to talk to the taxi cab driver. So I'm going to turn the camera around one more time. Okay, so let's see if you got the idea. Now, if I wanted to get to a location on Broadway and I hailed a taxi, what would I say? So we're going to do a poll or a quiz, please. Would I say, take me to Broadway Street, or would I say 72nd Street and Broadway? So I'm going to count down from 3. So we have 3, 2, 1, and blast off. Let's look. So if you said 72nd Street and Broadway, that is absolutely correct. Bust out those victory dances. Very exciting. You know how to hail a taxi cab like a true New Yorker. So you just get in and you give the intersection. And you can always toss a please on there if you would like, or you could say as quickly as possible if you're in a hurry and you want to get someplace very, very quickly. If you said, take me to Broadway, that can be seen as a little rude because it sounds so much like an order, take me to Broadway. I can definitely see someone with a lot of vivaciousness being like, take me to Broadway. But typically that it's not received nearly as well as just saying 72nd Street and Broadway, please. So if you're gonna get into a cab, you just wanna say 72nd Street and Broadway, please. And feel free to practice that in the chat. Like pretend that I'm a cab driver and I'm going to say, where do you wanna go? Where do you wanna go? And you can totally make up a location if you want. It doesn't have to be a New York City location, but if I'm the taxi cab driver, you get in my taxi cab, what are you going to say to me? What are you going to say to me in terms of knowing where to go? So remember, you want to know the intersection, and then you basically just say the intersection, and that's typically much more useful than an address. Of course, today we do also have things like Google Maps, and there's an app in the US, I don't know if you have it in Korea, called Waze, where they could type in the address and essentially find the intersection pretty easily. But if you want to sound like a true New Yorker, you're going to just give the intersection. Now, I'm going to attempt to show you, like if I was going to hail a cab, I would put my hand out like this and I'd be like, taxi! It's literally just like the movies. You stand out on the street, you put your hand out and you go, taxi! So we're going to turn the camera around and hopefully find a taxi. Here we are at the intersection of 77th Street and Central Park West. I've put my mask on to be COVID-19 compliant, and we're gonna try to get a taxi. Now, none of these taxis that are passing us right now are available because their lights aren't on. But I'm gonna put my hand out. This one, light's not on. Up. It looks like maybe we have a taker. Hello. Hello, I'm going to 72nd Street and Broadway, please. Okay. So here we are in a taxi. Something to point out, in our taxis, we have these videos. I'm going to actually turn the volume off of the video. Oh.
6049556. You are riding a vehicle M8G38. Driver ID is 5. Exiting VIP accessibility mode.
So in our taxi cabs, if you look, I'm talking to a friend in Korea, so I'm showing them how the taxi cabs work. So we have a base fare of $2.50, but the fare, you can actually see how it's going up right there. So that is how we know how much we're going to pay when we get to our final destination, which in this case is 72nd Street and Broadway. It's also kind of nice because we get to see the weather up there as well. They usually show us some news, but I'm going to turn this off just because it tends to be kind of loud. And I like to look out the window and see the sights of New York City as we drive around. And here we are in a New York City taxi cab driving around the Upper West Side. Okay, so here we are in our taxi cab. We gave them the intersection, which is 72nd Street and Broadway. We saw where where you could see what the fares were in the taxi, and now we're just enjoying the ride. We're just about 2 blocks away from our final destination. So here we are along 72nd Street. And if you want to pull over right up here, that's great. Yeah, just this intersection. And that's another thing that you can always say when you're ready to get out. You can say pull over. So we're going to choose our method of payment. And it's always nice to leave a good tip for our drivers. So we're just gonna insert our cards. We usually do this through the machine up here. So it's just going to authorize. And then I am going to request a receipt today. So there we have our receipt. This lovely driver is going to give us the receipt. Thank you so much. Have a great day. And now we're going to get out of the cab. Thank you. And there we go. We went on our very first taxi cab ride here in New York City. So we gave him the intersection that we're going to, which is 72nd Street and Broadway. We asked him to pull over. Again, that's a really great kind of second phrase for you today, to say pull over. So when you get here, you can see this is a crazy intersection, talking about intersections. There's a lot of streets that meet right here. So I was able to tell the cab, oh, that's a great place to pull over to let me out. And now we can continue to talk, and we will conclude today's Real Live in New York. To review, we did so much today. We explored Central Park. We got to see the Great Lawn. We learned about Pocahontas making its debut there. We learned about different people who have performed and who will perform in Central Park. We got to see the Belvedere Castle, which was used in Christmas movies like Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, and Elf. We saw the Delacorte Theater. We talked about the difference between hang on and hang out, which is very, very difficult. We saw the American Museum of Natural History, where you can see giant whales, or a giant whale, and where you can see dinosaur skeletons and dinosaur bones. And we learned about things of intrigue and what things are intriguing. And then we learned how to hail a taxi cab like a real New Yorker. We give them the intersection. So we give them the intersection, and then we can also ask them to pull over at the end when we know where we want to get dropped off. So you can say, oh, you can just pull over here, and you'll sound like a real New Yorker. If you see your location, just tell the cab, pull over right here, or you can pull over right here, and that's great. And then you will sound like a true New Yorker. So excellent job. I would love to know one last thing, one last quiz. What did you think of today's Real Live in New York? So we'll have another quiz, and I would love to know what you thought of today's Real Live in New York. And as always, in the chat, if you have any requests, any recommendations of sites, let us know, because we're always trying to make this a better experience and a more amazing experience for you. But in the meantime, I am loving showing you New York City, and I'm so excited to show you the city as springtime comes. So we have so many exciting classes planned for you in the future, and I hope that you join us next week. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.